The testing grounds of Skyworks Corporation. Midday sun blazing down hot. A brand new helicopter sat on the tarmac. Reporters surrounded the young CEO, cameras flashing bright. She held the microphone high above her head. Across the field, a man in coveralls stood watching. Quiet, still, unnoticed. The CEO's voice rang out loud and clear. "Fly this helicopter, Mr. Mechanic, and I will marry you." Laughter erupted everywhere around them. The man replied softly, "Careful what you promise, ma'am." 5 minutes later, the rotors spun fast. The helicopter lifted perfectly into the sky. The CEO stood frozen. Her face turned pale. The cameras kept rolling. His name was Daniel Holt, 38 years old, single father, former Air Force pilot. He had left the military after a mission accident, the kind that changes everything, the kind that grounds you forever. Now, he worked as a maintenance technician at Skyworks, a private aviation company. Nothing glamorous, just honest work. His daughter was named Ellie, 9 years old, smart as a whip. She loved drawing airplanes in her notebooks. She asked him the same question every week. "Dad, why don't you fly anymore?" He always gave her the same answer. "Because some wings need to rest before flying again, sweetheart." His wife had passed away 3 years ago. Cancer. It happened fast. Too fast. After that, flying felt impossible. The sky reminded him of everything he lost. So he chose the ground instead, fixing helicopters, checking engines, keeping other people safe in the air. Skyworks was run by Victoria Lane, 32 years old, sharp, cold, ruthless in business. She believed in one thing above all else: money makes people fly higher. She had no patience for weakness, no respect for humility. Success was power. Power was everything. The company was hosting a major event today, the launch of their new rescue helicopter. Media everywhere, investors watching closely. Daniel was assigned to the pre-flight technical inspection. His job was simple: make sure everything worked perfectly. When Victoria arrived at the testing grounds, she found him wiping down the helicopter body. His coveralls were stained with oil and grease. She wrinkled her nose in disgust. "I do not like oil stains on my helicopter, Mr. Holt." He looked up calmly. "Then you will hate what keeps it flying, ma'am." She froze for a second. Nobody talked to her like that. Nobody. But she said nothing, just turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the concrete. Nearby, 2 young engineers were watching the exchange. One whispered to the other, "She has no idea who he used to be." The other one shook his head. "Better not tell her. She does not listen anyway." Daniel went back to his work, checking hydraulics, testing control surfaces, running diagnostics on the flight computer. He did not care about Victoria's attitude. He had seen worse. War taught him that pride meant nothing when bullets started flying. What mattered was the machine. The helicopter had to be perfect. Lives depended on it. He ran his hand along the rotor blade, smooth, balanced, good. The engine was clean, fuel lines secure, avionics online, everything checked out. He stepped back and wiped his hands on a rag. The helicopter gleamed in the sunlight. Perfect. Victoria returned with her entourage. PR team, photographers, journalists, everyone smiling, everyone excited. She barely glanced at Daniel. "Is it ready?" "Yes, ma'am, all systems green." She nodded dismissively. "Good. Do not touch anything else. The real pilots will take over from here." Daniel said nothing, just packed up his tools and moved to the side. He had learned long ago that some people only see what they want to see. Titles, uniforms, expensive suits. They never see the truth hiding in plain sight. The presentation was about to begin. Cameras were positioned, microphones tested. The stage was set. Victoria stood at the center of it all, confident, radiant, in complete control. She had no idea what was about to happen. No idea at all. Subscribe if you believe real heroes don't need titles. The presentation began exactly on schedule. Victoria took the stage with perfect confidence. She spoke about innovation, about the future of rescue aviation, about Skyworks leading the industry. The investors nodded approvingly. The reporters scribbled notes. Everything was going perfectly. Then came the demonstration flight. The lead test pilot climbed into the cockpit, started the pre-flight sequence, flipped switches, checked gauges. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. The flight computer screen stayed dark. The engine would not respond. The entire system was frozen. Panic rippled through the technical team. Engineers rushed forward with laptops and diagnostic tools. Victoria's smile vanished. Her jaw tightened. What is happening? The chief engineer looked terrified. The software is not responding, ma'am. The system is completely locked up. I paid millions for this helicopter. Millions. And it will not even start? Her voice cut through the air like a blade. Cameras captured every word. This was becoming a disaster. The technical team scrambled. Nothing worked. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Victoria was livid. Her perfect launch was falling apart on live camera. Daniel had been standing at the edge of the crowd, watching quietly. He recognized the problem immediately, a calibration error in the flight management system. Simple fix if you knew what you were doing. He stepped forward. Ma'am, may I take a look? Victoria spun around, her eyes blazed with frustration. You are a mechanic, Mr. Holt, not a pilot. Sometimes you need both to understand a bird, ma'am. She stared at him, the audacity, the nerve. Then something shifted in her expression. A cruel smile appeared. She grabbed the microphone, turned to face the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, our mechanic here thinks he can fix this problem. Laughter rippled through the audience. Victoria's smile widened. Tell you what, Mr. Holt, if you can make this helicopter fly, I will marry you. The crowd erupted. Laughter, cheers, camera phones appeared everywhere. It was the perfect soundbite, the perfect joke, the CEO mocking the lowly mechanic. Victoria basked in the attention. This would go viral for sure. Daniel looked at her calmly. You should not mock people who know silence, ma'am. His voice was quiet, steady, no anger, no fear. He walked to the helicopter, climbed into the pilot seat. The chief engineer rushed over. Sir, please. The calibration is not safe. We have not cleared this for flight. Daniel's fingers moved across the control panel. Fast, precise, confident. It will be safe if you trust the math. He bypassed the automated startup sequence, accessed the manual override protocols, reset the calibration parameters. His hands moved like he had done this 1,000 times before, because he had, in deserts, in mountains, in war zones where machines failed and lives hung in the balance. The crowd had gone quiet now, watching. Victoria stood with her arms crossed, still smiling, still confident this would end in embarrassment. For him, not her. Daniel's hand moved to the throttle. He increased power gradually. The turbine began to whine. The rotor blades started turning. Slowly at first, then faster. The engineer stepped back, eyes wide. The helicopter vibrated, settled. The engine notes smoothed out into a perfect hum. Daniel pulled collective, increased throttle, adjusted cyclic. The helicopter lifted off the ground, smoothly, perfectly, like it was floating on air. Complete silence from the crowd. He took it up 20 feet, 30, held it in a stable hover. Then he executed a textbook orbit around the testing area. Bank angle perfect, altitude steady, not a single wobble. It was beautiful, professional, flawless. Every pilot in the audience knew what they were seeing. This was not luck. This was skill. Years of skill. Daniel brought the helicopter back to center, descended slowly, touched down so gently the landing gear barely compressed. He shut down the systems in perfect sequence. The rotor spun down gradually. Then silence. Complete and total silence. Daniel removed his headset, stepped out of the cockpit. His face showed nothing. No pride, no smugness, just quiet competence. The crowd remained frozen. Nobody knew what to say. Victoria stood like a statue, her mouth slightly open, her face pale. All the cameras were on her now, capturing her shock, her humiliation. Daniel walked past her, picked up his tool bag. She finally found her voice. Who taught you to fly like that? He stopped, turned back. War did, ma'am. The word hung in the air. War. Everyone looked at him differently now. The oil-stained coveralls, the quiet demeanor, the weathered hands. This was not just a mechanic. Victoria took a step forward. Wait, you were serious about that marriage part? Daniel looked at her. No smile, no anger. I am serious about everything I do, ma'am. He tipped his head slightly, a gesture of respect. Nothing more. Then he walked away. The cameras followed him. The reporters rushed forward with questions, but Daniel kept walking, back to the maintenance hangar, back to his work. Behind him, Victoria stood in the wreckage of her perfect day. The video was already uploading, already spreading. The CEO who mocked a mechanic, the mechanic who made her look like a fool. Within an hour, it would be everywhere. Type honor if you believe skill is louder than pride. The video went viral within hours. Mechanic flies CEO's helicopter after public challenge. 3 million views in 24 hours, then 5 million, then 10. Every news outlet picked it up. Every social media platform exploded with commentary. The headlines wrote themselves. Arrogant CEO humiliated by unknown mechanic. Billionaire mocked the wrong man. She said, marry me if you can fly. He flew. The comments section was brutal. Thousands of people defending Daniel, attacking Victoria. This is what happens when rich people think they are better than everyone. That man has more class in his pinky than she has in her entire body. She owes him an apology, a public one. Victoria sat in her office watching the fallout. Her PR team was in crisis mode. Her phone would not stop ringing. Investors demanding explanations. Board members expressing concern. Her reputation was crumbling in real time. She had been called arrogant before, cold, ruthless, but always in a way that felt like strength. This was different and this was shame. She tried to work, tried to focus on damage control, but her mind kept going back to that moment. The way he flew, the precision, the confidence. War did. What did that mean? She could not let it go. She had to know. The next morning, she drove to the maintenance hangar early, before most of the crew arrived. She found Daniel in the back, working on a rotor assembly, his coveralls already stained with grease. He did not look up when she approached. You embarrassed me in front of everyone. He continued working, his hands steady. No, ma'am, I just did my job. She felt anger rising again. Your job is to fix helicopters, not fly them, not make me look like a fool. He finally stopped, set down his wrench, looked at her. I did not make you do anything, ma'am. You made your own choices. You think you are smarter than me? No, ma'am, just quieter. The words stung more than any insult could. Victoria turned to leave. Then she saw it, a small photo taped inside his open toolbox, faded, worn at the edges, a man in military flight gear, standing with a crew in front of a helicopter. The side of the aircraft read Raven 6. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew that designation. Everyone in the aviation world knew that designation. Raven 6, the medevac helicopter from Afghanistan, the legendary rescue mission. She turned back slowly. You are Major Holt. It was not a question. It was recognition. Shock. Daniel said nothing, just watched her. You are the Raven pilot. He looked down at his hands, stained with oil in years of quiet work. Used to be, until the crash. Victoria's mind raced, the pieces falling into place. Major Daniel Holt, Air Force, Distinguished Flying Cross, Silver Star. The pilot who flew into enemy fire to extract a wounded medevac team. Who took 3 RPG hits and still brought everyone home. Almost everyone. You saved the medevac crew in Afghanistan. That was you. I did not save them all. His voice was quiet, heavy with old pain. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. Guilt, shame, horror at what she had done. I mocked a war hero. Daniel shook his head. No, ma'am, you just forgot that heroes do not need medals to prove who they are. She stood there, unable to move, unable to speak. This man had saved lives under fire, had sacrificed everything for people he did not know, and she had humiliated him for entertainment. She left without another word, drove back to her office in silence. But she could not leave it alone, could not pretend this had not happened. That night, she called an emergency board meeting, then contacted her PR team. I need to make a statement, a public one, tomorrow. Her team protested, said it would make things worse, said she should let it blow over. She ignored them all. The next day, she stood before the entire company, employees, press, cameras broadcasting live. Her hands shook slightly as she held the microphone. I want to address what happened at our product launch. The room went silent. I made a cruel joke at the expense of one of our employees. I mocked him publicly. I treated him as less than he is. She paused, took a breath. What I did not know, what I failed to see, is that Daniel Holt is not just a mechanic. She looked directly at the camera. He is Major Daniel Holt, United States Air Force, a decorated combat pilot who risked his life to save others. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The man I mocked built his courage in fire. Not in boardrooms, not in privilege. Her voice grew stronger. He represents everything I claimed to value but failed to recognize. Skill, dedication, humility, honor. She turned to where Daniel stood at the back of the room. He had not wanted to come. She had insisted. Effective immediately, Mr. Holt will lead our new division, Skyworks Rescue. He will train our pilots for real missions, real rescues, real purpose. The room erupted in applause. People stood. The sound was deafening. Daniel remained still, his face unreadable. Victoria stepped down from the podium, walked directly to him. She extended her hand. I am sorry, truly sorry. He looked at her hand, then at her face. Then he shook it. Apology accepted, ma'am. Can you forgive me? Already have. She felt tears threaten, pushed them back. What's wrong? Because holding grudges never saved anyone, ma'am, and I am in the business of saving people. The cameras captured it all. The handshake, the moment of genuine reconciliation. Later, after the crowd dispersed, Victoria found Daniel in the hallway. You could have been cruel to me. After what I said, what I did. He shrugged slightly. Cruelty never makes people fly higher, ma'am. She smiled. A real smile, not the polished corporate version. Then maybe I need a pilot like you to keep me grounded. He met her eyes. Careful, ma'am. I might take that as another promise. For the first time, she laughed. Genuine, unguarded. And for the first time, he smiled back. The video of her apology went viral too, bigger than the first one. CEO takes full responsibility and promotes the man she mocked. This is how you own your mistakes. Respect to both of them. The narrative had shifted from humiliation to redemption, and it all started with a man who knew that silence speaks louder than pride. 1 month later, the Skyworks Rescue Program officially launched to the public with great anticipation. The ceremony was held at the main hangar. Television crews filled every corner with equipment, live broadcast across multiple networks nationwide, reaching millions of viewers. This was not just a corporate event anymore. This was a defining moment in aviation history that would change everything. Victoria stood at the podium confidently, dressed professionally but differently than before. Less armor and walls, more authenticity and genuine warmth. She spoke to the crowd with genuine warmth and emotion. We are here today to celebrate something bigger than business, bigger than profit margins and quarterly earnings. She gestured to Daniel, who stood off to the side looking modest, uncomfortable with all the attention focused on him. This man reminded me that leadership is not about power or control. It is about humility and respect, about recognizing greatness even when it wears simple coveralls instead of expensive suits. The audience applauded. Daniel stepped forward when called by name. He looked the same as always. Simple button-down shirt pressed clean. No uniform or decorations. No medals pinned to his chest. Just himself, honest and real. He took the microphone reluctantly with hesitation. I am not good at speeches at all. People chuckled warmly with understanding and affection. But I know machines very well, and I know people even better. His voice was steady, clear. Machines can fly without fear or hesitation. They follow physics and mathematics. They obey rules without question. But humans are different and complex. We carry weight that machines never feel or understand. He paused deliberately, looked at the crowd with steady eyes. That is why we need both skill and heart working together. Technical knowledge and human compassion combined. Without both elements, we are just mere metal in the sky going nowhere. The silence was profound. Every word landed. This program is not about me. It is about building something that saves lives. Something that matters. The applause started small, then grew, then became thunderous. Victoria stepped forward with care. She held a beautiful wooden box, opened it carefully with both hands. Inside was a medal, custom made with precision, professionally engraved with gold lettering. She read the inscription aloud. To the man who flew without wings. She pinned it to his shirt. Her hands were shaking slightly. Thank you for teaching me what real leadership looks like. Daniel looked down at the medal, then at her. Thank you for listening, ma'am. From the audience section, a small voice suddenly called out loud and clear, "Go, Dad!" Everyone turned immediately. A little girl stood on her chair, holding a homemade sign that read, "Fly Dad," in bright, colorful markers. Ellie, his daughter. The crowd melted. Cameras zoomed in, captured the pure joy on her face. Daniel's composure finally cracked. His eyes glistened. He waved to her. She waved back frantically. The audience stood, a standing ovation that lasted minutes. After the ceremony, Victoria found Daniel near the helicopter display. Ellie was showing him her drawings. "You could have been cruel to me," Victoria said quietly. "After everything." He looked at her. "Cruelty never makes people fly, ma'am." She smiled. "You said that before." "Because it is still true." She hesitated, then he spoke carefully. "Maybe I need a pilot like you to keep me grounded when I forget what matters." He raised an eyebrow. "Careful, ma'am. I might take that as another promise." She laughed, genuine and free. Ellie tugged on her sleeve. "Are you going to be my dad's friend?" Victoria knelt down to her level. "I would like that very much." Ellie grinned. "Good. He needs more friends. He only has helicopters." Daniel groaned. Victoria laughed harder. For the first time in years, everything felt light. 1 year later, Skyworks Rescue had become a national program across the entire country, training pilots in every major state, saving lives every single week without fail. Daniel ran the training division with dedication and care, teaching young pilots the important difference between flying and leading with purpose. Victoria visited every single week without missing once, sometimes for important business meetings, sometimes just to talk and share stories. Ellie called her Aunt Vicky now with genuine affection, drew her beautiful pictures, showed her school homework proudly. The Aviation Expo was in full swing today, new helicopters on display everywhere, innovation and technology filling every corner. Victoria found Daniel standing quietly near the Raven replica, a memorial helicopter honoring the original crew who served. "Do you still fly, Major?" He smiled at the old title. "Only when the sky feels honest." She stood beside him. "I never officially accepted your marriage proposal, you know." He looked at her, surprised. "The one you made at the launch." "That was your proposal, ma'am." "Semantics." He laughed. "So are you accepting or declining?" She pulled out a photograph, the picture from that day. Daniel in coveralls, Victoria with her microphone. The moment before everything changed, she had framed it. The wooden frame was engraved. The man who made the impossible look simple. He took it carefully, studied it. "You kept this?" "I keep things that matter." They stood in comfortable silence. Ellie ran up, breathless. "Dad, they have a flight simulator. Can I try?" "Only if Aunt Vicky comes with you." Ellie grabbed Victoria's hand. "Come on, you have to see." Victoria let herself be pulled along, looked back at Daniel. "Coming?" Right behind you. He followed them through the expo, past the gleaming machines, past the corporate displays, toward the laughter, toward the light. Later, as the sun set, Daniel stood at the flight line, watching helicopters take off for evening training runs. Victoria appeared beside him. What are you thinking about? That challenges are funny things. How so? Some are designed to humiliate, to prove superiority. He watched a helicopter climb smoothly into the orange sky, but others reveal who we really are. Strip away the pretense. Show the truth underneath. She nodded slowly. And which one was yours? He looked at her, really looked at her. The kind that taught both of us to fly. She smiled, took his hand. Then I am glad you took the challenge, Major Holt. I am glad you learned from it, Miss Lane. In the distance, Ellie waved from the viewing platform. Daniel waved back. The helicopter circled overhead, graceful, purposeful, free. And below, three people stood together, grounded by choice, connected by truth, flying without ever leaving the earth. Some challenges are meant to humiliate us. Others are meant to reveal who is truly flying. Subscribe if you believe true power comes from humility, not pride.